Hey, what's up? Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Roll Pod, Alabama sports podcast from Bama 247. I'm Cody Goodwin, and joining me today, yet another member of our Bama 247 team. It's Brett Greenberg. Brett, how you doing, my man?
Good, Cody. Happy to be on. Got a couple tough acts to follow with Talty and Rodak, but happy to be on here to talk some recruiting.
Taking the first few shows here to really kind of introduce everybody, right? We're recording this on a Thursday, final day of August, just 2 days until the first game week of the 2023 season. Alabama hosts Middle Tennessee State this Saturday night at Bryant-Denny Stadium. But Brett's our recruiting guy at Bama 247. Like the rest of us, he started in early June, has hit the ground sprinting. Today's show, we're going to chat some recruiting with Brett, some recent commits, planned visits, who Alabama is recruiting, as well as some high school football, what Brett's seen through the first couple of weeks of the season, who he's going to hopefully catch up with this week. And then we'll also take a look at Saturday's game, some of the younger guys we're expecting to see against Middle Tennessee on Saturday. Before we dive in, though, Brett, this is just our third episode, right? Bunch of new guys, kind of, sort of. I feel like I'm the newest guy here, at least to the market. But we're going to continue with our introductions. I made both Talty and Rodak do this, so I'm going to make you do it too. Give us a quick sketch, man. Where'd you come from, your path to 247, and your most memorable Alabama football moment that you've covered so far?
Yeah, so like Cody said, Brett Greenberg, born and raised in Atlanta, Georgia, actually graduated from University of Alabama just a couple years ago. Spent my 3 or 4 years there at Tuscaloosa News covering Alabama athletics, primarily Alabama softball, which was an unbelievable beat to cover, as many of these fans on here listening know. That's a great program, a lot of fans behind that program. And so I've primarily covered, sports opposed as not compared to football. So I don't know if I have my exact favorable, memorable moment. I can say, probably being there as a student, that win in Tuscaloosa versus University of Georgia. I know it was a COVID year, not as many fans in the stadium, but as some people are aware, I'm a pretty large guy, so I kind of like the letting loose, letting my legs breathe and stuff like that, for sure.
Absolutely. Well, hey, if it's not football, like covering Alabama softball, man, that's had to have had some memorable moments. Tell me, okay, let's tee that one up then. What's most memorable softball moment while covering that program?
Man, I'd be remiss not to just talk about Montana Fouts as a, just overall, I know you were up in Iowa. I'm sure you heard her name a lot. And quite frankly, I tell people all this all the time. The last couple of years at University of Alabama, it was Bryce Young and Montana Fouts. She had the reach of Bryce Young around the country and in the SEC. But my one, I think, favorite moment of covering Alabama softball would be Alabama's my first year on the beat, first of 2 years. Alabama's in Women's College World Series. Game one, Montana Fouts is on the mound, SEC Pitcher of the Year, every award you can name, and it's her 21st birthday, and she throws a perfect game. I wasn't able to be there, but from afar and just talking with her, developing a relationship with her and people in and around the program, it was just awesome to see, great to write about. And my favorite in-person memory would probably be that same year. Bailey Hemphill, who, again, a lot of fans know who she is. She's the all-time leading home run in the program history. And so to get that all-time leading, she hit a walk-off go-ahead home run in the 6th inning against Tennessee in the Super Regionals, ended up winning that game, sending them to the Women's College World Series and giving Montana Fouts that perfect game. So, man, I tell people all the time, if you can check out Road Stadium, if you can get a ticket, first of all, I mean, tickets are probably already sold out for next year. It's a great environment, lots of fun, and they got Rita, so.
That's pretty fun, man. It's funny you mentioned that, like, I'm originally from Iowa. I've said this on the last 2 shows, been primarily covering wrestling. I think the closest thing I've gotten to covering Alabama football is like following Ross Pierschbacher when he came down here from Cedar Falls. And then really kind of following the recruitment of Caden Proctor, who's a guy we'll probably talk about later in this show. He Des Moines guy, committed to Iowa. Alabama put on the full court press, flipped him literally right before the early signing period. And then, he moved down to Tuscaloosa a month later and has been down here ever since. And so that's probably as close as I've gotten to covering the Tide. But, it's funny you mentioned that, like, being up in Iowa, like, yes, I've heard of Montana Fouts. Like, she's, college athletes, like, when they're good, they're really good, and everybody like knows them. So like rock star status type thing. And Montana Fouts had, a couple of years where she was the pitcher. Like, she was the one you had to know if you were going to follow and watch the Women's College World Series. Not unlike Iowa's Caitlin Clark, for example, right? Like women's basketball superstar, got the Hawkeyes to the national championship game this past year, lost to LSU, but like she's a household name now, right? Very similar to Montana Fouts, and kind of interesting to make those comparisons a little bit, just two sports that matter a ton in those markets and in those states and to those universities. And, when you got superstars like that, it's pretty fun to see them on a stage like that, to watch them shine.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know those Caitlin Clark and Montana Fouts were, I believe, in Los Angeles for some type of award this summer. I know they've talked to each other beyond that as well, just trying to be ambassadors for women's sports. And I think those two have done a great job of that for sure. And I don't know if you saw it, it was happening tonight. We're recording on Wednesday night. I believe it was Nebraska volleyball just sold out their $90,000 or 90,000 seat football stadium for volleyball game, which was just awesome to see. The video is great. So check it out if you haven't seen that yet.
Oh yeah. Nebraska volleyball selling. I think they're playing Nebraska Omaha. Doesn't matter. The fact that they sold out Memorial Stadium in Lincoln. Really cool. Really cool. I'm glad that it's like not just a moment for women's sports. Like they're really like, there's a lot of really good things happening. The Women's World Cup was this summer. Alabama softball has been, routinely a great program. Women's basketball has been on the rise. Like there's just a lot of good things, I think, going on in the women's sports space. And, Alabama is one of those schools that has absolutely played a small role in that. Really fun to hear that. This is Brett. Fun to introduce him there. We're going to talk a little bit more football today, specifically recruiting, right? Let's start with some recruiting news, man. Alabama's had a flurry of 24 and 25 commitments. That's 2024 and 2025. Just like to shorten it like that to make it simple for those listening. But since we all started at Bama 247, I ran the number 16 total commitments, I believe. 13 for the 24 class, including 5 this last month alone. 2 in the 25 class, Anthony Rogers, 4-star running back from IMG Academy, and Jamie French, 4-star receiver from Jacksonville. And then 1 even for the 26 class, Zyke Helton, I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, 6'2", 320-pound offensive lineman from Carrollton, Georgia. Most recent commitment came earlier this week, actually. Jay Lindsey, 3-star tight end from Butler, Alabama, originally committed to Mississippi State, decommitted, ultimately recommitted to Alabama. 6'5", 235-pound, top 50 tight end prospect nationally. Let's start there real quick, Brett. What can you tell us about this tight end and Jay Lindsey?
Yeah, you said a lot of it, but he being 6'5", 235, it's just he's ready now, I think, to be at that next level. He's the first one to tell you he plays at a lower division in AISA in high school football down in Butler, Alabama. But Alabama fans know this name pretty well. OJ Howard also happened to play in the AISA, so just food for thought there. I'm watching a lot of his film. He plays defensive end and tight end. He plays both ways for that school. So that kind of shows you, 1, the competition he's playing against, and 2, his physical nature. I mean, I watched probably 5-10 minutes of film. The first 3.5 minutes are him taking an edge or a linebacker, the poor edge or poor linebacker, just driving him back 10, 15 yards. Then he's getting up and he's looking on over them and he's looking for the next guy to block. But there's also multiple occasions where he's running a go route or he's running a slant. And he's catching the ball, he's high pointing the ball, and he's taking it for 50 yards to the house. And, I think we're going to see with, the installation of Tommy Rees and what we've heard of the 12 personnel, which I know we can't talk about enough with you with 12 personnel, but the two tight end set, talking with him, that played a big role in what he's heard, and talking with Coach Cox and the tight ends coach, Joe Cox, and talking about how they're going to be using a lot of guys at that position, maybe a little bit more than you've seen the last couple of years. And one thing I do know about this program is you're not going to play if you can't block. You saw that with Latu. He played for 4 years, was great. He was security blanket, could make catches for you, a lot of red zone touchdowns, but he was mainly, I think, a blocker. I don't think that's crazy to say. And I think Jay Lindsey takes pride in that for sure. And, while we're on the tight end subject with Caleb Odom as well, he's 6'5", 215, probably closer to 220. Saw him a couple of weeks ago in the home opener for Carrollton with no other than Julian Lewis, obviously the USC commit. Believe he's going to be in Tuscaloosa once or twice. We can talk about that a little bit later. But, Caleb Odom, mismatch. I mean, he can line up out wide. He can line up in the slot, line up with his hands in the dirt. And he takes a lot of pride in blocking as well. But, yeah, he can go and high point the ball. He's just a freak athlete. I think they're very happy with that tight end position. I don't anticipate them adding another guy at that position. I think they're pretty happy with what they've got right now.
Yeah, no, and it's exciting that, one, we're talking about tight ends, right? And that just might be the Big Ten in me still, just like, yes, like tight ends, blocking, catching.
Fullbacks
I don't
next.
know. Yeah, right. Like it's, I love the using multiple tight ends on the field because I've seen what multiple tight ends on the field can do. So it's fun to see and hear that that's sort of trickling down to the recruiting as well. A guy like Caleb Odom, like I saw, I saw him play week 1. That dude's got hands. Like he moves. He's a great athlete. But 2, like after Lindsey had announced his commitment, one of the first tweets I actually saw was Caleb Odom in response to him, like, hey, like best tight end room in the 24 recruiting class. Right. So like, that's encouraging to see that they're excited about, the idea that Tommy Rees might be there for quite a while. And obviously they know how well that he was able to scheme up some stuff for Michael Mayer when he was at Notre Dame. And, obviously we've been hearing a lot of good things about Alabama's tight end room during fall camp as well. So exciting to see that Jay Lindsey, they're excited about that, right? He's one of 5 commitments for Alabama in the month of August. The other 4, Peyton Woodyard, 4-star safety from St. John Bosco in California. That's a pretty good school. Amari Jefferson, 3-star athlete from the Baylor School in Chattanooga. Rydarius Morgan, 3-star safety from Phoenix City. And Drake Kirkpatrick Jr., making us all feel old, 3-star corner out of Gadsden City. Brett, what stands out to you about the rest of these guys and Alabama's recruiting throughout the month of August?
Yeah, for one, I think it's been a pretty good August. I think they've, missed on a couple guys they'd like to have, like Edric Houston. But, like I always try to tell people, nothing's official till the pen hits the paper in December or even January. But what sticks out to me about that haul in general is just how they're stacking on this elite secondary talent. You talk about Rydarius Morgan, Drake Kirkpatrick, Jalen Mbakwe, Xavier Brown. I mean, after going and getting the number 1 safety in the country last year and Caleb Downs and the number 3 cornerback in Des Ricks, they're continuing to stack up talent. I think Jalen Mbakwe is one of the best athletes in the country. I mean, he's ranked number 2. He's probably one of the best punt returners in high school. I think he's going to play a lot of cornerback and punt return. It's funny, just to kind of put his athleticism in his perspective. He started his senior year at quarterback for Clay Chalkville, 7A powerhouse school down in Alabama. And he threw for, I think, 160 yards and ran for another 80 and had 2 touchdowns last week. I think that just kind of speaks to his athleticism. And then I kind of want to hit on Drake Kirkpatrick, like you said, Drake Kirkpatrick Jr., excuse me. Yeah, he's making us feel old, but, you might look and say, okay, he's a 3-star. And I think that's been coming up more and more. Alabama, I was looking at it, has signed 6 3-stars, last couple of classes before that, there was no more than 2. But a lot of these guys, I think, are very underrated. Drake Kirkpatrick plays in another good region over in Gadsden area, had 2 interceptions the other night. Rydarius Morgan, I think, is just freak athlete, can fast, kind of a bullet to the ball. Was actually going to see him Friday night. And then Amari Jefferson, I really, really, really like Amari Jefferson. I know people see 3-star and he was committed to Tennessee for baseball, and you don't really see 2-sport athletes happen at the University of Alabama. I know he loves baseball. He had a great conversation with the baseball coach. I think that helped sway his mind. I think he was pretty much set on the football aspect of it, but the amount of weight he puts in baseball with the new Maryland hire or guy from Maryland, I think that played a part. But yeah, he had another guy that had 2 touchdowns. He actually played, they're from Chattanooga High because they played in Finland. Ireland last week, which I'm just like, these are high schools. Like, what's going on here? But he showed, a lot of explosiveness. He plays in another good area as well. So yeah, I think it's been overall a good month, maybe some misses, but I think it's going to start to pick up a little bit more in these next couple of months when these guys are going back on their unofficial and official visits. It slows down last couple of weeks just with not being able to contact, and most of the coaches are primarily focused on, the upcoming season. But I think it's going to start trickling down again soon in the next couple of weeks.
Yeah. Well, and you mentioned a lot of the, a lot of defensive backs, right, that have committed, or guys that maybe project into secondary roles. In the same way that like Jay Lindsey and Caleb Odom are excited about, Tommy Rees and his ability to scheme up tight ends. Like, who better to play defensive, for when you're a defensive back than Nick Saban, right? Like, I feel like that should just be an obvious thing that these guys get excited about on the recruiting trail. And, not just, I know Saban looks for very specific traits, very unique traits when it comes to his corners and his safeties. And I'm hearing you talk about these guys are, they do a lot of different things on the field. They play a lot of different sports. Saban really covets that type of versatility, right? That's one thing he's really impressed on throughout this fall camp. Like he wants to develop a secondary that, if they need to pass off assignments, they can play corner, they can play in the slot, they can play safety, they can play star. So having a lot of guys that can do a lot of different things and show off that versatility. I mean, even returning punts, right? Kool-Aid McKinstry was an All-American in that role last year. That's good. Like, right. That's exactly what Saban wants. And, a lot of these guys might be 3 stars, or maybe, fringe 4 stars, but, they still got another season to go through. There's a very good chance that when the reevaluations come out, they'll take a bump. But 2, like Saban's no dummy, man. Like he knows what he wants. He likes what he sees, obviously, otherwise he wouldn't extend an offer. So, hey, if he feels good, I feel good. And if he feels good enough to extend an offer, I think people should probably be excited about these kids wanting to join the program.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you kind of hit it right on the head there. But yeah, I like to kind of remind people that Saban's been doing this a long time. Track record speaks for itself on the field, and that starts with recruiting. It's funny, the composite team rankings came out for talent, the annual 247, and Alabama was number 1 by, I think it was 60 plus points. They've been number 1 the last 3 years. So that's just the stockpiling of recruitment that he's getting and recruits that he's getting. It clearly speaks for itself. There's 18 5-stars on the roster this year, which is it's just crazy to me.
That's bonkers. Alabama's 2024 recruiting class currently ranked number 4 nationally by 247, behind number 1 Georgia, number 2 Ohio State, and number 3 Florida. Shout out to the Gators, right? Crimson Tide, 19 total commitments in its 24 class. Pair of 5 stars, cornerback Jalen Mbakwe, like you mentioned before, and quarterback Julian Sayin, as well as 11 4-stars. I'm seeing 5 defensive backs, 4 receivers, and then 3 each on the offense and defensive lines. Couple of linebackers as well. Pretty strong follow-up for Alabama after they have the top-ranked 2023 recruiting class. Brett, as you look at this class overall, as it stands right now, what kind of sticks out? What trends are you seeing? And really, what does it kind of tell us about what Alabama hoping to accomplish with this class?
Yeah, I think, kind of going position by position here, quarterback, as far as recruiting goes, Alabama hasn't had to worry about that since, Julian Sayin committed in November, and years beyond that, maybe different situation when we get on the field. I know you know that all too well, covering fall practice. But yeah, I think quarterback's good. I think maybe sometimes people look at this class and, are scrolling for a running back commit. One guy that sticks out as a potential to fill that hole, so to speak, for lack of better words, is Daniel Hill, Meridian, Mississippi athlete, 6'1", 225, kind of just a bowling ball, can really run down your throat and downhill. Was set to commit August 23rd, delayed that a day prior. Gotta love that. But no word on when he's going to set his next commitment date. But people in the industry, people around I've talked to, seem South Carolina was the lock there. But this delay, I think, puts Alabama in another position, in a bit of a better position, maybe to get him back on campus. He's been on campus, I think, can't even count how many times this summer. He's got some ties to Tuscaloosa. And as far as wide receiver go, I think they're good there. We hit on those guys. Rico Scott, he's a guy out of Pennsylvania, 4-star, maybe not as noteworthy. People don't talk about him as much, but he's just a speedster. He had a game-winning touchdown on a slant, about 60-yard slant the other week. I think O-line is another one of those holes, I guess. Only 3 guys committed. All 3 look to be interior offensive linemen at the next level. I know Casey Poe played left tackle for Lindale this Friday. I think they're trying to probably want to be completely happy with that class, try to add maybe 1 or 2 more guys, hopefully at the offensive tackle position. And like we talked about tight ends, I think they're more than happy there. D-line, they've got Isaiah Faga. And they've got Jeremiah Beeman, 2 in-state kids. I think they like him a lot. Jeremiah Beeman is a highly ranked guy, 4-star. Isaiah Faga is another one of those 3 stars, but plays for Central High School. Another good plays, actually teammates with Rydarius Morgan. So happy to go see them this week. But yeah, I think maybe add another guy or 2 there. There's Solomon Williams out of Tampa, Florida, 4-star edge, D-line rusher. That seems to be very high on Alabama. I know he's going to be back, I think, either the Texas game or Tennessee game. Still trying to figure that out. Very intriguing prospect also on the D-line is Steve Mubu-Mwama. It's just difficult he's a guy that from Canada kind of came down to camps this year. on a circuit, went to Auburn, South Carolina, Georgia, Florida, Alabama. And as talking with him and talking with his trainer, just every coach was like, who the hell is this guy? Like, where'd he come from? And it's funny, he's a 2025 guy. Sat down with Nick Saban after camp and said, I don't care what class you are, we want you now. I think he's extremely high on Alabama. He's a kid that it looks the part, 6'5", 260, just massive, loves Alabama. They showed him this first real love, as he would put it, showed the most love at the beginning. I think they're in the running for them. Linebacker, so we've got Sterling Dixon, who's listed as an edge. He's played middle linebacker for Spanish Fort this year, still finding his footing in there. Transfer from Mobile Christian for 3. He played there 3 years prior, was edge, get after the quarterback, but Spanish Fort's got a Louisville commit that plays edge. So I'm thinking maybe they're trying to disperse the talent a little bit, try to get both levels. But you got Justin Okoronkwo from Germany, very intriguing prospect. I'm sure you've seen him a bunch of times, 6'3", 235, runs like a 4.5 40. And it goes back to, if Alabama wants you and Nick Saban likes you, he's going to find you, and it doesn't matter where you're from. I think they like him a lot. Caden Jones out of Arden, North Carolina, 4-star, hard hitter, bruiser, talented guy, speed, sideline to sideline. And then, we talked about the secondary class. Jameer Grimsley is one I forgot or left out a little bit earlier. He's listed as a wide receiver. He's going to play cornerback at the next level, long, lengthy. I think he's one of those guys that Alabama and Nick Saban is looking for. Speed, plays wide receiver for his high school as well. 6'1", long arms. I think that's kind of the whole breakdown. I think, coming off the great class they had last year, I think it's always good to have perspective, and meant to hit on this earlier with the running back position, just signing Richard Young, signing Justice Haynes, and you have Jam Miller, and you got a couple other guys. That running back room is stacked, just quite frankly. And maybe they're not going for a guy this year, and maybe they're going to go all in for a guy in 2025. I like to always kind of keep that perspective and quite frankly, just with the way the transfer portal is now, maybe they know you're going to have kind of your picking, being Alabama, at any position that you pretty much want to go out and get a guy.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, we saw that with Jahmyr Gibbs. We've seen that, Jalen Key's a guy that came through the transfer portal from UAB. Seems like he's going to get a lot of run, maybe even some starting snaps right out of the gate on Saturday. There's the portal's there if they're not able to, land who they want to on the recruiting trail. It's funny you mentioned the running backs, because that was actually the first thing that came to my mind, was just like, they got Justice Haynes, who's probably going to get a lot of run this year. Richard Young seems like he's in line to redshirt, but I know that they're really high on him. Jam Miller's probably going to come back next year. He's looked really good this camp. Wouldn't be too worried if they didn't get a running back, because they've got, like you mentioned, pretty deep room right now. And you've got Anthony Rogers coming in with the next class, assuming that he sticks. They seem fine. They seem mostly fine.
And one thing I'll add too is the 2025 class. I haven't been doing this a very long time, but just always followed it. Seems to be very talented at the running back position as well. I know they're targeting a lot of guys and they're very high on them. I know it seems light years away for 25 guys to commit, but I think they're in good position to. And all these guys you talk to all carry kind of the same sentiment that I'm good with Anthony Rogers being there. I want to be alongside with him. I want to stack that running back room again, like it once was. And one thing also about the current 2024 class, they're very, very close. They've always been on campus together. Julian Salen, Jalen Mbakwe, Sterling Dixon were, I guess, the early commitments in 2022, kind of in the fall, winter time. They developed great relationships. They've been on campus multiple times. They have a group message. They're always, hey, who should we go get next, type of thing. And I think just having these guys on campus all the time is just such a big plus. I always talk about this, maybe with, Georgia bringing Dylan Raiola over to Buford. For Georgia, you have him in your backyard. He can come to Athens every weekend, help be that lead recruiter. And to Alabama's, that's Jalen Mbakwe. I mean, he's been very active in getting guys to come and just check it out and talking them up. And I think that's anytime you can get guys on campus. Like I said, it's a huge plus.
100%. Well, and speaking of getting guys on campus, I know another huge part of your role as the recruiting guy is to make sure you're keeping tabs on all the guys that are visiting. The season is a prime time to do that, right? And especially this coming weekend. Let's start there this weekend first. I know there's some other guys that you're keeping tabs on who are going to be here for Alabama, Texas in week 2, but week 1 against Middle Tennessee. The list I have is only of the guys who are not currently committed to Alabama. I know that there's going to be a handful of guys that are committed who are going to be there. But what sticks out about these visitors that are coming in is there's a couple of guys that are committed to Auburn who are going to be on the sidelines on Saturday. What more can you tell us about the visitors that Alabama is going to be hosting on Saturday?
Well, I'm shocked you asked me about that. Yeah, so one of those guys is 2024 5-star top-rated linebacker DeMarcus Riddick. He was, one of the bigger recruitments I think we covered in the last couple months, just with being a longtime Georgia guy. You started to hear rumblings that he was going to decommit. He felt somewhere else. Then it comes down to Alabama Auburn. Anytime anything comes down to Alabama Auburn, you've seen it on the message boards, you've seen it over Twitter.
Fits are up if it's between Alabama and Auburn, man.
Doesn't matter what it is, man. But yeah, so he ultimately ended up committing to Auburn. Part of that kind of recruiting surge by Hugh Freeze for those couple weeks, who's also done a great job. Maybe I shouldn't have said that. But yeah, I think getting him back on campus this week, being week 1, is a very, very, I wouldn't say good sign because, he's still committed to Auburn, but very big to get him back on campus. And we can dive into it a little bit later, but with just the guys that are committed being there in his ear, a lot of them, a lot of these in-state guys know each other, grew up together, played 7-on-7 versus each other. I think that's a big get. And another guy, Auburn commit, is 2025 4-star D lineman, Malik Autry. Still does not have an Alabama offer. Anyone you talk to, it's coming. He needs to put a little bit more tape together, but he's one of those guys that, he's not a 24 guy, just from a physical standpoint. Got to watch both of them over at a showcase down in Alabama a couple weeks ago. They looked the part. He talked to me. He grew up loving Alabama, loves everything about Alabama, loves the relationships. I think that offer is going to come soon. I think he's worth, looking at. And then another 2024 guy, 3-star linebacker, Quentin Reese. Maybe not as highly rated as a guy, but we go back to, if he's getting a real committal offer, Nick Saban sees something we don't. He was doesn't have many Power 5 offers. I believe Alabama is the only one. I know he's going to be back in town. I think it's good for that. But if you notice, those 3 guys, all defense. Alabama, I think, as you've seen it too with the SEC, you need defensive linemen, you need offensive linemen, you need to rotate guys out. So I think they're trying to stack as many guys as possible. As far as the commits, not as big as a list as it's going to be for the next weekend. I think also worth noting is, there may not be as many targets or uncommitted players coming this weekend, but that's because they're coming the following weekend. They're coming to see Texas under the lights. You talk to a lot of guys that haven't been to Bryant-Denny for a game or even under the lights. Everybody they've heard, people are in their ear. But yeah, I think Jalen Mbakwe is going to be there. I believe Sterling Dixon's going to be there. William Sanders will be there. Believe Ryan Williams, the 2025 5-star, and he's been him alongside Jamie French, who's the other 2025 5-star wide receiver committed, part of that small but very good class, been very active on the recruiting world. And anytime you got 2 wide receivers that are number 1 and number 4 in the country, you're going to have a pretty easy time getting a quarterback in that class. And then another guy committed is 4-star offensive tackle Mason Short out of Evans, Georgia. So yeah, I mean, they don't have a huge list, but they're going to have a lot more guys at Texas.
Yeah. Well, and so you follow this a lot more than I do. One, because it's your job. 2, like recruiting, there's just so many flying bullets that I just find it so hard to keep track of. Alabama's got to feel pretty confident about getting 2 guys who are currently committed to Auburn on campus week 1. I know it's not Texas game, but it's the first game of the season. They're committed to the other school, but they want to come visit Alabama again. Like, they got to feel pretty good about that, right?
Yeah. I again, I don't always, like you said it too, there's so much to follow in, and a lot of these kids know exactly what they're doing. And I'm not saying that's the case, but may just want to come to Alabama to be talked about them more. I'm not saying that's the case at all. Not, naming names or anything like that. I truly don't think that's the case. But yeah, and I go back to anytime you can get these guys on campus, committed elsewhere or not, it's a great thing. I know DeMarcus has been there I believe he's been there for a game before. But yeah, to get him on campus, doesn't matter the game, talk to him in person, give him kind of the royal treatment. Again, I don't know if you remember, but he was the actual for the spring game, Nick Saban pulls up in his Mercedes. The rest of the team gets off the bus, but he pulls up right in front of the Walk of Champions, and DeMarcus Riddick gets out of the shotgun front seat alongside Nick Saban. So that kind of shows you how much they're prioritizing him, and I'm sure he's going to have another great time. And I think it's just give him something more to think about. Give him more something to think about. And then as far as the 2025 guy with Malik Autry, I think it's a good thing you get him on campus. Maybe, who knows, maybe the offer comes this weekend. I'm not entirely sure. But again, you follow the 2025. I try not to look so far into 2025 just because it's so far away. I mean, Alabama has 5 commitments. All 5 could end up elsewhere. I mean, just who knows? You never know, especially in the world of NIL with the way we know how things work here. Anything can happen at any moment.
100%. Yeah. Do a quick glance ahead. Alabama, Texas. We don't need to rattle through all of those names that are visiting. If you want to check out all the names that Brett does know, please go to Bama 247's VIP board. He's got a running list that he will keep updated all the way through until kickoff for the Alabama, Texas game. So we're talking next weekend, week 2. A lot of 4 and 5 stars on this list. A lot of number 1 ranked guys, number 2 ranked guys at their position nationally. As a teaser, like give us like, who are the priority guys that are coming to visit Alabama for the Texas game next week?
Yeah, so there's a trio of 2024 guys. Terry Bussey, number 2 athlete, plays 4 different sports in high school. Similar to Jalen Mbakwe, can play both ways. He's a guy that Alabama could have and probably plug in anywhere. He's told me that he's happy to play wherever he wants. The team wants him. He's got an official visit for the Texas weekend, then he'll head to LSU before his September 28th announcement. I think A&M is probably, him being a Texas guy, A&M is in the best position. But again, to get this guy on campus, to show him the ropes, give him the royal treatment is a great thing. Another 2024 guy is Favor Edwin. Very interesting prospect. Actually was born in Nigeria, moved over a couple years ago, has played 2 real games of high school football in his career. 6'8", 300 pounds, was in Tuscaloosa for the Champions Cookout, got an offer a couple weeks prior out of camp. That shows you what Alabama sees in him without even having tape. He obviously dominated and did his job at camp to get that offer. He absolutely loves Alabama, similar to just the way he was treated and the current 2024 guys, and Casey Poe, William Sanders, Joseph Ionata, talking to him and, hey, let's build this next O-line. You talk about the current guys talking about getting back to running the ball. These guys want to do that too and create another, great wall in Alabama. And then a guy I talked about as well is Solomon Williams, Tampa, Florida. Getting him on campus again, I think, is a good thing. I talked to him in, I think it was July. He had named Oregon and Alabama his leaders. That was before he went on other visits. So interested to get back with him and talk with him and learn a little bit more about Alabama. Very interesting prospect. Number 2 D end, I think a top 8 player in 2025, in-state guy, Zion Grady. They've been very high on him. Getting him back on campus is another great thing. Couple other guys for you. It's far out, I know, but 2026 guy, number 1 ranked linebacker, Anthony Jones out of Mobile, Alabama. He had, I think, like 131 tackles as a freshman last year, like 2 interceptions and like 3 touchdowns. Just an absolute freak. I think he's the number 7 overall player in the latest 2026 initial top 100. Plenty of other guys, plenty of more guys are going to come in the next couple of weeks. I think, one thing you learn too is these kids are 16, 17 years old. I know it's 16 and 17. I don't know if I was planning even a day out, and they've got coaches in their ears saying, hey, come to us, hey, come to us, hey, come to us type thing. And just with high school schedule too, they're still trying to figure it out. And as far as commits go, I was talking to, earlier with Middle Tennessee. That's a loaded group of commits set to be in town. I believe it's 12 or 13. Majority, I think it's 8 or 9 of the 24 guys. So to get them back together and get those bonds together and create better relationships and lock in that they're with the Crimson Tide, nothing's going to change that. And then go talk to a 25 guy, go talk to a 26 guy, go talk to Terry Bussey and the other guys. Hey, commit now. There's going to, you put a lot of pressure on them. It's funny. I was talking with Jay Lindsay and he was at the Champions Cookout and he was telling me, all those guys were, this is when he was Mississippi State commit at the time. they're all giving a bunch of heat and, hey, like, what do you like? Come on now. And obviously it worked. So it'll be very interesting. But yeah, like you said, full list, a running list on Bama 247, working to confirm a whole lot more. It's going to be one of the more loaded weekends, I think, of recruiting for Alabama. Another week to look at is LSU, of course, down the road. And we'll continue to follow that every week.
A lot of dudes coming to campus. A lot of dudes coming to Tuscaloosa. Another fun part of your job, Brett, is getting to watch a ton of high school football. Last 2 weekends, you've kept tabs on Alabama commits and targets, kind of in and around Alabama and Georgia and really all over the country. As the high school season's kicked off, where all have you been so far? Who all have you seen? And honestly, what are your plans for this coming Friday?
Yeah, so like I said earlier, I was over at Carrollton High School for ESPN2 matchup, part of the Geico ESPN kickoff. Saw Julian Lewis, saw Zakai Helton, who's committed 2026 O-lineman, played a lot of center. Still young. He didn't play center last year, still trying to learn his role, but he's a guy that I think Alabama fans are going to like. And I would be thoroughly shocked if he's not end up in Tuscaloosa in 2 years. I mean, he's like, I want to go now type thing. I don't know if he's ready. Just from physicality standpoint, he's going to fill out. But yeah, we talked about Caleb Odom, just an absolute freak the way he plays, and he kind of just glides. He had an outstanding one-handed catch. Wasn't able to go anywhere last weekend, but was able to watch 4 different commits as part of the Geico ESPN Challenge. You watch Ryan Williams. No shocker why he's the number 1 receiver in the country. I mean, he's make a guy miss and he's gone. He had 2 touchdowns against a really good Lipscomb Academy team. I thought that game was going to be challenging for Saraland. They've got a bunch of talent with KJ Lacey, Texas commit, defensive lineman Antonio Coleman, who Alabama 2025 guy Alabama was very high on. It was a tough game. They won 31-30. Also was able to watch Julian Sand. You hear about Julian Sand all the time. You watch the clips from the Elite 11 and win an Elite 11 MVP, kind of surging up the rankings, number 2 quarterback, number 5 overall player. Watching him on my TV, it's just like, I knew he was going to have pinpoint accuracy. I knew he was going to find his guys, but what thoroughly impressed me was his ability to get out of the pocket and use his feet. He had, I think it was like 77 rushing yards, 1 rushing touchdown. You watch him, it's like, oh, that's a sack. Oh, wait, he's running. Like, it's very impressive. So he was talking with his trainer, who he's had since 8th grade, this afternoon, and he was just telling me, he's like, listen, man, people in and around and in his inner circle knew that was the case. People around San Diego knew that was the case. It was so big to have him on the national stage and showcase why he's the number 2 quarterback in the country. Some people will tell you he should be number 1. Some people should tell you he should be number 2. It'll be very interesting to see who ends up being the number 1 rated quarterback when it's all said and done. Quite frankly, to me, the guy's committed and he's on campus. I don't care if he's number 1 or number 2. But, some fans, especially with, between an Alabama and a Georgia guy, you want to have that pride. I'm trying to think who else. That's pretty much it. I have a full breakdown of Julian Sand. Had a great conversation with his trainer, just kind of talk about his progression, how he's handled the pressure being in San Diego. And it was very cool to get some perspective from a guy who's known him since he was, 10, 11, 12 years old, to see what he is now. He said he always knew this was going to be the case. And the following that Julian has out there on the younger generation, his trainer talked about, which is very interesting, very cool to see. I think Alabama fans are really going to like this guy. Whole lot of expectations, though.
I was going to say heavy wears the crown, right? But, when you're a quarterback like that, and especially in today's world, like with social media, the way things fly around all the time and the way that people have access to certain things. A decade ago, I probably am not paying any attention to the Elite 11 competition. This year, I'm not following it beat for beat, but hey, how are they doing? What's going on? Back when I was in Iowa, there were a few quarterbacks that would go compete at that competition, like JJ Cole and guys like that. And, so naturally I'm just kind of like, okay, who are the big names? And, naturally you've got, Julian Sane and Dylan Raiola. And it's like, oh, okay. That's pretty cool. Right. And so, when you commit to a Georgia, you commit to an Alabama, kids are young enough now where those are the, 2 of the programs. Right. And so it's, so you're little and you're training in the same room or near, a guy that's going to go to Alabama. It's like, whoa,
Oh
Like
yeah, absolutely.
what's that guy doing? How do I become like him? Right. Like it's a very magnetic thing. Like I've seen it on a smaller scale in Iowa. So I can only imagine, I don't know if it's pressure or just, the amount of pride he probably feels in being a dude like that in his community.
Yeah, absolutely. And talking with him too, I think that can get to someone's head very easily. You talk about, how good you are. You're told how good you are forever. You're the highest ranked. You're one of the highest ranked guys. You're going to Alabama, but he's just mentally. I think he's different. I think he reminds me of Bryce Young. I know anytime you make comparisons, it can get dicey, and certainly Bryce Young. I'm not trying to do either a disservice at all, but just the way he carries himself, the way his teammates, you can tell respect him, and uh, when he has command of that locker room. He has the ability to know when to goof off and be a kid, be a high school kid. Sometimes I forget that for a second. These kids are 16, 17 years old. I remember my time when I was 16, 17 years old. I was doing things. But yeah, I think he's just has that humility about him, and can be serious and grab you by the neck and tell you where you need to be, but it's never going to be in a negative way. It's going to be, I'm trying to get you better. I think that's a guy that can command the huddle. I think is huge at any school at any level.
100%. No, I've talked with plenty of trainers and, coaches, and, when guys get to a certain level as, a high school prospect, that can be their arrival moment, and they can kind of sit back and chill and maybe not be as motivated because they feel like they've hit a certain spot, or, they can hit that certain spot and it's like, okay, what do I got to do to stay here? What do I have to do to keep climbing? Right. It's easy to maybe take the first few steps up the ladder, but then the incremental steps that come after that, it's like, that takes a ton more hard work.
Oh yeah,
Right.
absolutely. Absolutely.
So, it's cool to see that a guy like Julian saying, like, he seems to fall more in the ladder where it's like, cool, I'm here. How do I stay here? Right. And so he can
For
just
sure.
continues to put in work like that. Other guys that have continued to put in work like that are now currently on Alabama's roster. Going to transition to last half of the episode here, talking about this upcoming. There is a game on Saturday at long last, Alabama versus Middle Tennessee. And I figured kind of a fun part here to maybe chat about with you is, I know you're more focused on the 24, 25, even 26 guys, guys who are still currently on the recruiting trail, but handful of young guys I'm expecting, at least, and I'm sure a lot of us are probably going to see the field on Saturday. So, kind of the true freshman list, I think we can go ahead and put in Sharpie that we're probably going to see Caleb Downs, right? True freshman safety from Georgia, Caden Proctor, left tackle out of Iowa. Perhaps we could see Justice Haynes at running back. Maybe that might be a later in the game type of thing. Some other freshmen that I know Saban's talked about, Keon Keeley, Yanze Pierre, Cole Adams potentially in the return game. Some other guys that we might see. Do we see a Jalen Hale? Do we see a Jaron Hamilton? Do we see a Miles McVay? Do we see Dylan Lonergan maybe in the fourth quarter? I'm not 100% sure. Also some redshirt freshmen. Probably going to see Ty Simpson. Probably going to see some Danny Lewis. Probably going to see some Antonio Kite or a little, maybe some Elijah Pritchett, maybe some Jake Pope. I'm curious for you, Brett, guy that pays attention to a lot of these younger guys as they transition from recruits to actual players. Of all the young guys on Alabama's roster that'll probably see the field on Saturday, who are you most excited to see?
Yeah, again, low hanging fruit here. I seem, we talk about him pretty much every single day, and you just talked about it too. Obviously, Caleb Downs is going to be that starter. I'm very interested. I think Rodak was talking about it. Just, yeah, you can be that college level guy, but what's going to happen when you're actually on the field against college level players? I think he's going to be fine. Again, I really love Justice Haynes, one of the top running backs in the country. It's, again, stacked running back room, but I think, maybe he has a chance to play in that game and maybe not come out type thing. And no disservice or discredit to Jam Miller or any of those other guys, but I think Justice Haynes is going to be very, very good. I know he was dealing with a little bit of a contusion, but I think he's fully back, I believe. One guy interested me, I know you mentioned, was Jalen Hale, just with, I guess, the uncertainty at wide receiver position, just with what we've heard about the drops and maybe not a solid set of starters yet, or that alpha guy. I don't know if Jalen Hale can be that alpha guy, but he's highly ranked 5-star. I think he has an opportunity to play. And it's funny, I saw something the other day that, believe it or not, Jalen Hale is just the 5th 5-star in the Saban era from wide receiver position. And I was like, huh.
That's crazy.
I'm like, what? So all I'll tell you is Devontae Smith and Jalen Waddle were not 4 stars, which is just it's just that stat kind of just blew my mind, just with the success that at wide receiver that they've had for a very long time. So yeah, obviously highly rated guy. I think he has a chance to play. And then again, another guy is Malik Benson. I know he's a community college guy. You know, you talked about him a lot. He's gotten to see. He seems like he's been getting a lot of reps. I think he has opportunity to play a lot as well. And again, yeah, Keon Keeley, I was, listening to the defensive breakdown with you and Rodak, just with, you got to have line depth. You just have to, you got to be able to rotate 8, 10, maybe even 12 guys just by the end of the game, by the end of the season. So you're not broken down. And, he, number one player, looks the part physically. I think Alabama's been kind of missing, like Rodak was saying, that alpha guy or guy that comes in and just dominates from day one. Obviously, you've got the Will Anderson, but as far as, the inside of the line and all that type of stuff, I think he has a chance to maybe play a lot as well. Let's see who else. And then, yeah, again, your guy, so to speak, Caden Proctor. I don't know if is he going to be a starter.
So I'm under the impression that he has like a half step lead on Pritchett to start at left tackle. So I imagine they'll both probably play. I picture Caden probably taking the first snaps at left tackle, and they'll probably find a way to smoothly, work them both out. But that's at least everything I've heard.
Right. Yeah. And I think it's one of those things too, especially looking back to last year, just the uncharacteristic mistakes that Alabama fans haven't seen in a long time. The holdings, the false starts. I think it's going to be a little bit of a short leash up there for sure, especially in that first game against a team, Middle Tennessee, that you're expected to win. I think in all reality, for me, it's cut down on mistakes. And if you win by 7 points, or you win by 25 points, whatever it may be, get as many guys looks as possible. A win's a win, in my opinion. I know everybody would like to win 63-3. Does that happen? May, but who knows if it does. But yeah, I think, like you said, it's going to be a kind of just put his full roster out there, so to speak. Maybe not everybody's going to play, but hopefully build a comfortable enough lead to let those guys get out there, show them what you're made of. I mean, you look at Isaiah Bond last year, maybe wasn't in the main rotation, but started getting more and more play. And by the end of the year, he was a starter and had great catches and got his first touchdown in the Sugar Bowl. So again, just because a guy maybe doesn't play as much at week 1 that was highly ranked, he could very well be a key part of the offense or defense towards the end of the year. And obviously we look at Isaiah Bond, it appears he's probably going to be a starter. I don't know if you agree with that or not, but he seems to be like he's going to be a big part of this offense.
Yeah, I think he'll probably start in the slot, like right out of the gate. It's funny. I included, handful of, Justice Haynes, Jaron Hale, maybe Dylan Lonergan, maybe Keon Keeley, maybe Jan Pierre. I included some of those guys because you assume that against a Middle Tennessee that the A and the B teams, right, more or less take care of business, so that the fourth quarter you can get some of these guys, some of those varsity reps, right? And so you hope that you'll see Keon Keeley in the fourth quarter. You hope that Justice Haynes is the running back in the fourth quarter. You hope that, maybe Dylan Lonergan's out there throwing passes. You hope that Jalen Hale's on the receiving end of those passes, right? Like there's, a week 1 opponent, like don't play with your food, just go take care of business. But you hope that they take care of business in a way that allows some of these younger guys to get out there and play. You kind of hit on, the last 2 questions that I had for you here. Kind of who do you think of the young guys, right? These true freshmen, redshirt freshmen, guys that just, this is going to be their first season where they're actually going to, be in contention to get some run here. Who do you think will have the biggest impact this season for Alabama when looking at a lot of the younger guys?
Again, it's just, if you look at impact, you look at season, it's going to be Caleb Downs. I mean, it just is. I think it is going to be Justice Haynes again. I really, really like him. I think, like you mentioned too, Jan Pierre has an opportunity to be, you got Dallas Turner, you got Chris Braswell, but behind that, like you said, what's there? A whole lot of 4 stars and 5 stars, but can you prove it on the field? Let's see who else we got here. Justin Jefferson, I know, was in the running, at least in the spring. I don't know how much he's played since then, but I like him a lot. I think Jahad Campbell, who's 5-star last year, will get some run at linebacker position. Like Rodak and you were saying too, injuries are part of the game. So, you never really can predict who's going to step in a role, but hopefully, these guys are ready to, fill position in need should something happen.
100%. Yeah, I think I might be a homer pick a little bit just because of where I came from, but I think Caden Proctor is a guy who could also be the answer to this question, right? Just because if he's able to step forward, and I think one thing that maybe people don't maybe know 100% right. You see a guy who's 6'7", 360 pounds, and it's just like, yeah, like he is a dude. He struggled a little bit his junior year at Southeast Polk in Des Moines. He was a guy that, he had earned the 5-star rating. But there were a couple of games earlier that year where I was just kind of like, I'm not sure I see it. Come to find later, you talk with people who know football way better than I do, right? Like playing left tackle is hard. You're isolated usually against a very talented defensive end. And on the other sideline, there's a pretty good coaching staff that knows how to coach that defensive end into very successful positions. Like you're going to get tested. I don't care how good or bad you are, right? So midway through his junior year, I go back and watch Caden Proctor again, kind of like, okay, like show me something, kid. Okay, he looks like a 5-star now, right? And he looked like that the rest of his high school career. He helped lead his high school to 2 large class state championships in the state of Iowa. So if this kid comes out and he's going to look the part, he's a freak. He has got some tremendous strength. If people try to come out and out physical him, it's just not going to work. Like as soon as he gets his hands on you, that he wins the rep. It's over. How does he handle the speed? How does he handle stunts in games? Especially in the SEC where guys are just that much better, right? It just means more. It wouldn't surprise me if Proctor struggles from time to time, especially in his first game out, especially when they get into SEC play. But with more reps, this is a guy that's going to settle in. He's going to figure out a lot of stuff. He's going to have Tyler Booker next to him that's going to help him ease that transition in. He's going to be fine. He's going to be really, really good. And he's going to be your left tackle for the next 3 to 4 years. And you guys should be really excited about that.
I don't know about 4 years, Cody.
I said 3 to 4, because 6'7", 360, kid's probably going to the league.
Yeah, and I'm glad you mentioned Tyler Booker. One guy I also wanted to mention was Seth McLaughlin. That 4-star ended up being plugged into the starter role at the end 2 seasons ago.
Each of the last 2 seasons.
Right.
Forget that.
Yeah, has played really well. And I think he's a guy at the center position that's going to help Caden Proctor move along. And he's been in the SEC for a long time. He's played a lot of games as well. So, I'm excited to watch the offensive line. I really am. I know that's probably been the biggest hype point. I think, you talk, Cole Kubek was talking about it. Greg McElroy was talking about it. So, they got a lot of expectations. They've been talking a lot too. And we'll see it in a couple of days.
Final question I got for you tonight, Brett. Who is someone we likely won't see a lot of in week 1 who could then get more playing time, more reps as the season goes?
Of the younger guys or anybody?
Younger guys.
Caleb, no, I'm just kidding.
That kid's going to get all the
reps. Let's see here. I like Hunter Osborne a lot. Number 21 D lineman. Again, I think that room is full of 4 and 5 stars, but he played at Hewitt-Trussville, Class 7A, very tough region, very tough schedule over there, near the Tuscaloosa area, actually. I think maybe he surprises people, but yeah, it's not going to be easy. Like you said, it's the SEC. I don't care if you're a 4 or a 5 star. We've seen it happen many times where guys just don't pan out. But yeah, he's maybe someone to follow for sure.
I think when I thought of this question as I was forming it earlier today, Justice Haynes was the only guy in my head, right? Because Alabama likes their running back room. You got Jace McClellan, you got Jam Miller, you got Roydell Williams, and then you've got Justice Haynes. I know he played really, really well last spring. He had a tremendous A-day. Small, itty-bitty, non-really concerned injuries through fall camp. But this is a guy who I think he's gonna flash in the fourth quarter. Not that attrition is going to ultimately allow him, but I think the coaching staff is going to allow him the opportunity to slowly climb the depth chart. And not that he'll be the starter by the end of the year, but I think he'll firmly be in that running back rotation as the season goes. And he could be a really good change of pace guy as long as he, is up to date on his pass protection. If he can show that he can catch out of the backfield a little bit, which he did show in the spring. This is a guy who probably a lot of mop-up duty early, but then as the season goes, I think he can get a lot more run with the A-team. I think he could, maybe not so much a game changer, but definitely a guy who can impact games for Alabama as the season goes along.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you hit a spot on there. And for some reason, just anybody who wears number 22 at running back, automatically I think they're just incredible. They just look better to me. I don't know why. It's just maybe it's Mark Ingram. I'm not sure, but yeah, I think you're exactly right. I think he's going to be a guy that's going to be getting carries a lot. And again, injuries are part of the game. You never know what happens there. Fumbles are part of the game. And one thing you can't do in Nick Saban's offense and Nick Saban's team is fumble. So we'll see, man.
100%. That's all we've got today, man. Brett, I appreciate you joining me, man. This was fun.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's do it again, my man.
We will be back Sunday tentatively to recap Alabama's week 1 game against Middle Tennessee. I think we're all largely expecting the Tide to win without much fuss, but there are still plenty of things that we will be keeping an eye on throughout Saturday's games, including many of the young guys we just hit on. In the meantime, be sure to rate and review the show wherever you listen to your podcast, Apple, Spotify, even our Bama 247 YouTube page. Last week, Talty and I broke down Alabama's offense. Earlier this week, Rodak and I discussed Alabama's defense. So be sure to check out those episodes if you haven't already. Subscribe to Bama 247 and 247 Sports, especially now that the season is here, guys. Got a lot of fun stuff coming, and we don't want you to miss a thing. Thanks so much for listening. We'll talk again soon.